outside is still held in the velvet embrace of night. And as you sink deeper into your blankets, imagine a small stone foundry at the edge of a sleeping village, where the air is cool and the stars are beginning to fade into a hazy indigo. Inside the workshop, the air is already thick with a comforting, gentle heat that radiates from the heart of the great stone furnace. And a single low ember casts a dim, rhythmic orange glow across the heavy iron molds and the dusted stone floor. There is no sound here but the faint, rhythmic ticking of cooling clay and the distant, muffled sigh of the wind in the eaves, creating a space that is perfectly safe, perfectly warm, and perfectly still. You are invited now to let your own breath slow down, to match the quiet pulse of the bronze, and to drift away into the gentle, repetitive motions of a day built of light and shadow and peace. Chapter 1. The worker stirs in his small bed long before the sun has thought to crest the distant sleeping hills, his eyes opening slowly to the familiar sight of the heavy oak beams above his head, and he feels a deep, heavy sense of calm as he pushes back the thick wool blankets to stand on the cool, solid floorboards of his room. He dresses in the dim light of the early morning, his fingers moving with a quiet and practiced memory over the soft linen of his tunic and the worn leather of his belt. And the house remains entirely silent around him, a stillness that feels like a kind and protective weight pressing softly against his skin as he moves toward the foundry where the metal lives. He walks with soft, rhythmic footsteps across the small courtyard, the transition from sleep to work marked by the cool touch of the night air and the faint, sweet scent of wood smoke that lingers in the rafters. And as he opens the heavy door to the workshop, he is greeted by the deep, resonant warmth of the hearth. In the center of the room stands the great stone furnace, its thick walls holding the heat of 1,000 fires, and the worker reaches for his first task of the day, which is the slow and meditative feeding of the flames. He takes a heavy log of seasoned oak, feeling the rough texture of the bark against his palms, and he slides it carefully into the firebox, watching as the orange embers lick at the wood and the light begins to bloom like a golden flower in the dimness. He repeats this motion dozens of times, his arms moving in a wide, hypnotic arc that requires no thought at all, and he finds a comfort in the repetition, his mind becoming as quiet and still as the stone walls themselves. Next, he turns his attention to the molds, the massive shapes made of clay and horsehair and brick that will soon hold the molten bronze. And he begins to check each one with a slow and practiced hand, feeling the coolness of the earth and the smoothness of the surface. He takes a soft brush and begins to wipe down the edges of the pit, the heavy iron frames where the metal will be poured. And he moves the brush in long is as rhythmic and calming as a heartbeat. He prepares the materials for the alloy, the heavy ingots of copper and the smaller pieces of tin that will melt into liquid music, and he places them into the clay crucibles with a slow and steady hand, watching the metal shine in the candlelight. The air in the foundry is beginning to warm as the furnace grows brighter, the heat spreading out in a gentle wave that touches his face and his arms. And he stands for a moment, just watching the way the light dances on the ceiling, casting slow, wobbling shadows that look like the waving of tall grass in a summer field. There is no hurry here, no urgency to the dawning day, only the slow transition from the stillness of sleep to the stillness of work. A transition marked by the smell of hot stone and the soft, white light that is now filling the room. He gathers his long iron rods and his heavy lifting chains, laying them out in a neat, orderly line on the wooden bench where they catch the flickering glow. And he feels a deep and abiding contentment, knowing that everything is in its place and the day is unfolding exactly as it should, one slow and gentle movement at a time. The world outside may be waking to its chores and its noise, but here the time is measured only by the steady burning of the fire and the slow, invisible melting of the metal, and he is content to exist in this circle of warmth for as long as the sun remains in the sky. He feels the weight of the day falling away before it has even truly begun, replaced by the simple, grounding reality of the iron and the stone. And as he waits for the bronze to soften, he breathes in the stillness, letting it fill his lungs and slow his pulse until he is nearly as still as the furnace itself, watching the orange glow and listening to the silence of the morning. Every action is a part of a long, unbroken chain of peace, a ritual that brings a sense of order to his soul, and he feels the weight of the world's noise falling away, leaving only this quiet room and the soft, repetitive setup of his craft. He moves to the corner to fetch a fresh pail of water, his boots making a soft scritch on the floor, and he sets it near the mold pit, watching the reflection of the fire dance on the water surface like tiny stars vanishing at dawn. And he waits, and he breathes, and the world stays soft and gray. Chapter 2. The furnace has reached its perfect heat, a soft and shimmering intensity that turns the copper and tin into a pool of liquid amber. And the foundry worker begins the long and meditative process of preparing the pour, his hands grasping the long iron lever with a slow and deliberate strength that feels like the turning of a great, silent wheel. He leans forward, adjusting the heavy chains that support the crucible, and he moves with a slow, rhythmic grace, watching as the molten metal begins to stir in the heat, its surface perfectly smooth and glowing with an internal fire that illuminates his face and his hands. He begins the pour, a slow and steady stream of liquid light that leaves the crucible and finds its way into the narrow opening of the clay mold. And the sound of the metal meeting the earth is a low, rhythmic hiss that is as soothing as the sound of the tide against a sandy shore. He pours and he waits, his movements fluid and soft, and he watches as the bronze fills the void, the orange light slowly fading into a deep, warm red as it settles into the shape of the bell. Now comes the watching, the most quiet and delicate part of the day, as he stands by the pit and exhales a single, slow breath. A breath that is as gentle as a sigh and as steady as the wind in the trees. He watches the metal expand and settle, a small river of light forming in the center of the mold, and he feels the connection between his own body and the living bronze, a sense of belonging that is as deep as the earth and as light as the air. He returns to the hearth to stir the remaining embers, the light from the fire flaring up to meet him, and he continues the dance, moving between the pit and the furnace with a grace that comes from 1,000 afternoons just like this one. He takes his heavy wooden tongs, soaked in cool water, and he adjusts the vents in the mold, the steam rising in soft, white curls that smell of the forest and the rain, and he feels the vibration of the cooling metal in his hands, a low and steady hum that seems to travel up his arms and settle in his heart. Every motion is slow, every motion is repetitive, and he loses himself in the rhythm of the work, his eyes half closed as he follows the glowing shape of the bell through the dimness of the room. He uses his small hammer to tap gently against the iron frame, the metal clicking softly with a melodic, rhythmic sound that echoes through the quiet foundry. And he finds a quiet joy in the order and the beauty he is witnessing, one slow moment at a time. The heat from the furnace is a constant, heavy presence that wraps around his shoulders like a thick wool blanket, making his limbs feel loose and relaxed. And the only sound in the world is the soft, wet sloshing of the cooling water and the rhythmic creak of his leather boots on the stone floor. He does not rush the cooling, for the bronze cannot be hurried, and so he embraces the slowness, letting the repetition wash over him like a gentle tide that pulls away all his worries and leaves only the peace of the glow. He pauses occasionally to wipe the sweat from his brow, his skin feeling warm and damp, and then he returns to the rhythm, the iron rods becoming an extension of his own body as he moves in harmony with the fire. The light in the foundry is changing now, the bright yellow of noon turning into a soft and rich gold as the hours pass in a blur of quiet productivity, and the dust motes in the air dance in the thick beams of light, moving in slow and lazy spirals that mirror the worker's own repetitive movements. He is content to stay in this one spot for as long as the metal requires, a guardian of the song who finds his greatest joy in the simple act of being present and still. And as he finishes the last check of the vents, he feels a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet life he leads, for the bronze that melts watches the surface of the metal as it begins to cloud over, the bright brilliance turning into a matte, solid texture. And he finds himself nodding in rhythm with the heat, his mind as calm and still as the deep water of a mountain lake. Push, pull, wait. Push, pull, wait, until the transformation is complete and the bell is held safe in the arms of the clay. Chapter 3. The afternoon sun has begun its long and lazy slide toward the horizon, the light in the foundry turning from gold to a deep, warm amber, and the worker feels a gentle, sleepy fatigue beginning to settle into his bones, a warm and pleasant tiredness that tells him the work of the day is done. He takes the last of the iron rods and places them carefully onto the stone rack, and he feels the release of the heat from his hands as he pulls away, leaving the glowing molds to rest in the dark and quiet earth. He begins the final, quiet tasks of the evening with a body that feels heavy and pleasantly relaxed, moving through the workshop to gather his tools and return them to their proper places by the cooling vat. He cleans the heavy chains with a soft scrap of linen, wiping away the faint dust of the clay until the iron is bright and gray once more, and he places them back in their wooden chests with a quiet and final precision. Hearing the soft click of metal against wood in a silence of the room, he sweeps the stone floor with a broom made of dried reeds, the sound of the bristles against the dust a rhythmic and soothing hush, hush, hush that lulls the spirit into a deeper state of calm. And he gathers the stray fragments of clay into a small pile to be returned to the earth when the sun returns. The fire in the furnace has begun to settle into a bed of glowing ruby embers. The lighted casts now dim and soft, and the worker stands for a moment in the doorway of the foundry, looking back at the tools and the stone and the heat, all resting in the soft, blue shadows of the twilight. The world outside is growing quiet now, the birds tucking their heads under their wings and the evening mist rolling in from the river, and he feels a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that comes from a day spent in simple, honest labor. He walks slowly back toward his small cottage, his footsteps making a soft, rhythmic thud on the cool earth, and he sees the first star beginning to twinkle in the vast, quiet sky, a tiny diamond of light in the fading blue. He enters his room and feels the softness of the evening air on his face, a cool and refreshing breeze that carries the scent of the damp earth and the sleeping garden. And he moves with a slow and fluid grace as he prepares for his own rest. He undresses with slow and practiced movements, laying his tunic across a wooden stool and feeling the lightness of his body as he steps into the cool, dark space of his bed, where the blankets are waiting for him like a warm embrace. He climbs into his bed, the linen sheets feeling cool and crisp at quickly warming to the heat of his body as he pulls the thick wool blankets up to his chin, tucking them in around his shoulders until he is encased in a cocoon of warmth and safety. He lies there for a moment with his eyes open, looking at the dim outlines of his room, the familiar shapes of the chest and the chair, and the small window where the moonlight filters through in a pale silver beam. His muscles feel loose and heavy, every tension of the day melting away into the soft mattress. And he lets his head sink into the pillow, his thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. The silence of the cottage is total, a deep and liquid quiet that fills his ears and his heart. And he knows that the metal is resting in the earth, the furnace is resting in the dark, and the world is exactly as it should be, safe and still under the watch of the moon. He closes his eyes and breathes in the faint scent of wood smoke that lingers in his hair. And as the house settles around him with a final, gentle sigh, he drifts off into a sleep that is as deep and nourishing as the bronze he has spent his day tending. He feels the house around him, a sturdy shell of stone and timber, protecting him from the wind and the night, and he sinks further into the softness of the bed, his breath becoming a slow, rhythmic wave that carries him away. The world is far away now, a distant and hazy place that has no power over the stillness of his room. And he is a part of the night, a part of the fire, and a part of the peace that remains when the furnace light